There, guys. Again, this is Alex here, bringing you part 3 of What If Deku Was the Familiar of Zero. So, before we continue, I have here Ed on the other line. He's been scripting this shit. He actually has. Explain yourself, Ed. Just explain yourself.
Hello, guys. This is Erdgan Tsuchimikado, and I want to clarify that some scenes, since they will not plan out the same way as the original anime, I like to point out that basically it actually works the same way as for locations and scenarios. But in this case, since Deku's not a perv like Saito, he would actually have more of a good relation. So I hope you enjoy.
So you're basically saying them that he's not treating them as a slave. And yeah, one of you guys did comment that. Don't worry. We did read their comments. So, but before we continue, also, I guess that the majority of you are also viewers for the What If Deku Was the Reincarnation of Link? You asked the question, dude, because you're the one doing that one. That's completely you.
Okay. In this case, I would want to ask you viewers that watched the series for the reincarnation of Link, who should receive one for all? Obviously excluding Deku, Katsumi, Griselda, and Paya.
Alright, there we go.
In this case, write them down in the comments and tell me why they should be chosen.
Yeah, I'll also pin a comment there just so you can get a little bit of a I can get at least a scenario in regards to that, who you choosing. But regardless, now let's get to this what if. So, where we last left off, Deku was taken aback by an older man calling Luis darling. Then this man introduced himself as Warts, as he looked at Deku and said, "So, excuse you, aren't I allowed to greet my fiancée?" Gish and Deku were baffled, as Kirsche from her room, wondered who in the world would make such a fuss early in the morning. She saw a good-looking man as she fell in love at first sight, as she kind of got a little bit upset that they were basically fighting for Louise's attention. Izuku continued the argument with Warts. It turned out that he's actually 28 years old. Louise doesn't know how to act because of mixed feelings she has for Warts and Izuku. Not knowing who to choose, Warts took the initiative. He picked Louise up and mounted his griffin, while Gish and Deku followed on the horses. Along the way, Louise catches glimpses of Izuku's face, as it looked a bit gloom. They arrived at the port city, they dismounted their mounts, and they went to the hotel. But Izuku remained behind with the excuse of catching up later. In reality, he was down in the dumps. Delph chimed in. Delph saying, What's the matter, partner?" As Izuku says, "Nothing, it's just that as Delph would say, that you like Louise, don't ya? But you got intimidated by that Warts guy, huh?" As Izuku said, "How did you," as Delph would say, "Simple, partner. Whenever you're with her, you're like, 'No need to fear, I am here.' But ever since that guy showed up, you're like, 'Yeah, whatever.' So, if it's not hard to notice, and if I noticed it, the others did as well. Except that little tag-along. He's somewhat eccentric or oblivious to his surroundings." As Izuku was quite shocked, and he started to mutter. But a hand on his shoulder brought him back to reality as he turned his head to see Luis. Deku stuttered, trying to explain himself, but Luis interrupted him. Luis saying, "I know it must be a shock, but this engagement was kind of set up by my parents. Considering that I'm not very talented in magic, they wanted to make sure that I at least got married. So," as Izuku says, don't worry. I understand. It took me by surprise. That's all. If he's the captain of the Griffin Knights, he must be good, right? 'If that's so, I just feel like a third wheel. I think I should have just, you know, been a bit more patient. But, you know, I understand. It took me by surprise. That's all. If he's the captain of the Griffin Knights, he must be good, right? 'If that's so, I just feel like a third wheel. I think I should have just, stayed at the academy. Mr. Colbert actually said something about having a sample of an ancient dragon and actually asked me if I could help him out with his research. And Luis getting angry and cutting Izuku off. You're here on the mission because you are my familiar. As such, I go, you follow. This is basic knowledge for any familiar. Sheesh, I thought you got that from the beginning. As Izuku was left speechless. As a little flash with Bakugo talking to him, saying something similar, making him snap. Izuku saying, you think that just because you summon here and making me your familiar gives you the right to treat me like some sort of errand boy and have me ready at a snap of a finger? I am my own person with goals and a future. That's it, I don't give a crap about this place, and the reason I'm in this predicament is your fault. Do you think that I want to be here? Besides, do you have a slightest idea of how worried I am for my mother and how she might be worried sick for me? What about my mentor, All Might? We were supposed to meet the next morning on the day when you summoned me, but more importantly, how do you think I feel? The only thing I wanted to do was make my mother and mentor proud. But no, now we're here. As Luis felt guilty and, sorry for him. While, tears fell down her cheeks, she said a simple sorry and then ran off crying. As soon as she left, Delph chimed in. Whoa, partner, I had no idea you had such a pent-up aggression that you would tell her off like that. I have no words to describe what you just did. As Izuku just realizing what he said to Luis, with an even sadder mood, Delph tried to console him and asked about the pent-up aggression Deku started to explain. As Izuku said, Delph, you see, in my world, 80% of the population has these powers known as quirks that they're born with. Asked Delph, you mean that power you have under the runes? Izuku saying, yeah, that I really wasn't born with it. Instead of it, it was kind of passed down by my mentor. Before then, I was just a useless nobody, always being picked up on and being appalled by what I considered to be my best friend. And when we were kids, the pent-up aggression was towards him, but I ended up snapping at Luis. I just want to go home. As Delph says, I see, partner. You had all that pent-up aggression. Anyhow, you might want to apologize to Luis. As Izuku says, I know, I'll try finding her. As Izuku would start looking everywhere, but there was no sign of her. He met up with Gish and Warts to see if they knew where her whereabouts, but surprisingly, she was with them eating. Izuku joined them and sat next to Gish. They talked about Izuku's achievements, making some sarcastic remarks, which rolled Izuku the wrong way. Then Warts started accusing, Izuku for yelling at Luis, which caused some turmoil and led to a fight between Izuku and Warts. They stepped outside and started to duel. As Izuku would actually, not be willing to use his sword, as he actually would start up charging 20% of All For One in his arm and legs, and actually tries to draw Delph just for a little bit of a punch. Pulling some of Gran Torino style moves, which kind of disoriented Wards in a way. And when the opening appeared, Izuku managed to make a few cuts in Ward's face, also cutting a bit, parts of his attire, but loses towards the end by a thrust of his blunt sword. With it, he casted a wind spell into Izuku's stomach, ending the duel, which made Izuku upset and left the area. As Izuku thinking that he is still weak, Delph actually chimes in, saying, "Hey partner, I have noticed something. Why do you always use that power of yours in your arms and legs?" As Izuku says, simple, for easy movements, easy fast movements and strong punches or a swing of a blade. As Delph would say, no, you don't get it at all. I mean, why do you only power them up instead of your whole body? As Izuku, well, my entire body? I never thought about it like that. I guess that's why I lost, because my body was vulnerable, unlike my arms and legs. Thanks, Stealth. As Stealth would say, no problem, partner. Izuku placed Stealth on a nearby wall as they could try to use one for all throughout his whole body, while Luis popped out of nowhere. As Luis says, "Hey, Izuku, you got a minute? I just want to apologize to you for summoning you here." And as Izuku says, "No, Luis, no, I'm the one who's supposed to be apologizing for snapping at you like that. It's just that I had a lot on my mind, and it was too much for me to keep under wraps. So I ended up blaming you for everything. So if you could you find it in your heart to forgive me?" As Louis was happy that he wasn't angry at her. As Louise would say, "Now, since that has been taken care of, there was something I wanted to tell you. I'll be marrying Wards after this mission is over." As Izuku was shocked to hear what she just said, and just replied with, whatever, before going back to what he was doing. As Louise left the area with a lot of guilt on her mind and considering what he said to her, but she noticed Delph was placed at the wall. As she passed by Delph popped out from his scabbard. As Delph would say, "You do realize that he likes you, don't ya?" As Louise would say, "Well, by the way he snapped at me, it doesn't look like it." As Delph would say, "About that, he told me what he was on his mind, and trust me when I say it's not your fault. At least, not entirely." As Louise would say, "But it is. I ruined his life, and now I feel terrible. That's why I'm marrying Wards after the mission. Then he can just return to his world, because from now on he could live his own life. And since he was angry at me, he seems that he was so needed there. Don't know how, but I'll surely find a way to get him back." As Stealth would say, "Geez, you kids these days are such drama queens. You and I both know you love my partner and he loves you, so why don't you kids just kiss and make up already?" As Louise would actually start blushing and say, "What? How could you say such nonsense? I'm nobility and he's Delph saying, "A peasant? By this world's standards, probably, but in his world, a hero in training, and with the strong power which can stand up to anyone if he really wanted to. But I just noticed something in him. He's got a noble heart, which is rare to have. Think about what I told you while you're on the altar, then you'll know your answer." As Louis scoffed at Delph and left, as they could try to figure out how to spread the power equally throughout his body. A few hours has passed as Gish went to look for Izuku, finding in a secluded place which he was training in, to tell him that the flying ship was about to set sail to Albion. As they were about to head towards the ship, an earth golem appeared and tried to attack Izuku, but countered it by slicing its arm off, as Fouquet was back for revenge, and engaged into battle with the two boys. That lasted for quite a while, until the golem was hit by an attack from behind, and Gish noticed that Tabitha and Kirke were there. As Fouquet, with the odds against her, she fled the scene. Just as in the anime. It's relieved that she revealed that she fled. Oh wait. They are relieved that she fled, as Gish gets lost in the conversation and a flying ship passes above them. Izuku, thinking on what Fouquet said before she left, "I bought enough time." Realizing realization actually hits Izuku, and he actually states that Wards is actually a traitor and that Louise is in danger, as he's trying to process this in his own mind. On Louise's end, it happens the same as the anime. Izuku starts actually trying to make a plan, getting a map from one of the people in charge of the ship route, so they know more or less where Albion is. Thanks to Tabitha and her dragon's Sylphid, they managed to get where Louise was, in a church about to get married to Wards by the Prince of Wales. But the only audience was just a few knights wearing the same armor. As Izuku was about to slam the door open, Gish kind of stopped him, as Gish would say, "Wait, if you're going to interrupt the ceremony, you must do it right? As Izuku would say, what are you talking about? Do you see she's in danger? Gish, of course I do, but do you want to, to get Luis back? As Izuku, how did you, as Gish would say, please, a romantic, a romantic gentleman like moi knows all there is to know about romance. As Izuku would just question and saying, really? As Gish says, of course not, you lovesick fool. It's obvious that you love her, but by the way, you too act, but I guess only you and Luis never got the hint. As Izuku would say, wait, what? Anyways, you and me need to talk after all this is over. Now tell me, as Gish whispered something into Izuku's ears. Meanwhile, with Luis brainwashed with Wards at the altar, Prince Wales asked Luis if she would take Wards as her husband, as Luis actually stuttered. But in her mind, she was screaming for help. Then suddenly, they could barge in the church yelling, I won't allow it, causing the brainwashed Luis to free herself from the spell as she ran into Izuku's arms, crying and apologizing. As Izuku would hug her, grabbing her tightly, trying to soothe her, while Warts was visibly angry on why and how was Izuku there, confusing the prince, but Warts angrily stabs the prince through his stomach as the rest would play out as in the anime. Dove achieving its real form, giving a shine to the blade, and the once bronze hilt became gold. But as Izuku powered himself with One for All, full cowling, the golden hilt became a platinum green, and the blade was emitting lightning just like Izuku was. As Izuku and Warts clash, Warts actually lost an arm, and the rest would play out similar as in the anime until they returned to the academy. Some days passed since then. Luis reported to the princess, gave a report to the headmaster, and finding out that she's one of the, mage of the void, and that Izuku is the legendary familiar known as Gandalf. Izuku, on the other hand, was moping around for failing the mission, while Mr. Colbell asked him if he wouldn't mind going with him to discover the ruins of the ancient dragon located somewhere near to the village of Tolb, which Kirke and Tabata and Gish actually kind of overheard. And they asked to tag along. Mr. Colbert didn't really have any problems with it, just saying the more the merrier. Talking about it some more, Siesta was planning on returning to her hometown to spend some time with her family. She also overhears the conversation and actually informs Mr. Colbert that she's from Tob and the Robe of the Dragon once actually belonged to her great-grandfather, and it's now a family heirloom, which actually excited Mr. Colbert that it will be a lot easier with someone guiding them. The only thing remaining is Izuku asking for Luis's permission, which was kind of hard for him. Ever since they escaped Albion, there was this tension between them, and Mr. Colbert actually asked Luis if they could go with him for some research instead. Instead, Luis joined as well. Then the gang departed. As they arrived in Tolb, Siesta went and brought her stuff to her house and grabbed the map to the location of the Robe of the Dragon. As they arrived, it was simple to find the shrine, a storage house, as they just saw a lock on the doors, which Mr. Colbert used magic to unlock it. Tabitha found a tombstone with some symbols, and Izuku saw it. Him struggling to decipher the symbols, and actually checked it out. As Izuku saw the tombstone with the symbols, his jaw kind of dropped and started reading, Navy Hanson Takio Sasaki, rest here in another world. As someone would pop up from behind saying, let's see another one who is as Luis kind of popped up from behind, surprised, she said, "You can read that?" As Izuku is a little bit shocked, it's actually Japanese. It's the language I used back in my world. Before Luis could say anything, Mr. Cobell yelled, "We found it!" As the others went inside, they were admiring the robe, wondering, what is it? And what can it do? When Izuku saw the robe, if his jaw was jaw dropped like once again, as it wasn't even attached to his skull at this point. It would have been on the floor, as both he gets a little bit excited but confused at the same time, as Izuku would say, "Why is an antique like this here? And most importantly, how did it get here?" As Mr. Colbert would say, "What do you mean? Do you know what this is?" As Izuku says, "Of course, I know what this is. Well, at least I have the basic idea of it. This is a plane, and if I remember correctly, it's from WW2. So that means 1, 2, 3. Counting his fingers, roughly about 200 to 250 years ago in my world." Not really shocked to hear what Izuku said. Mr. Kobat said, "Young Izuku, you said WW2. What does that mean?" As Izuku would say, "Oh, sorry, WW2 stands for World War II. A war that actually was kind of worldwide in my world. And there were two of them, actually." As, again, everyone was surprised on that statement, especially for the fact of two worldwide wars and the time difference between the robe and Izuku, and the difference between their time and that of Izuku's. There was a huge gap, almost being Zero Tsukaima's being almost to an age of 1,300, what's called, 1,000, between the 13th century to the 14th century, basically. And, the My Hero verse basically taking almost to a time frame of, present timeline, but more like 100 years into the future, like 2174, yeah, roughly. So after the explanation, Mr. Colbert actually informs that maybe Izuku could actually return home by flying into the solar eclipse that's going to happen within 5 days at a time, as Izuku was quite excited on the thought of it, but Luis didn't know if to be happy or sad, as everything would quite play out as the same as in the anime. On Act 1 of the war, it ends up being the same, with Izuku using the Zero Fighter to help out in the war, but unfortunately loses the chance to return home, and the relationship between Izuku and Luis, but not enough for either of them to step up and express their actual feelings. Season 2 is just a preparation for the actual war. The things that happen are basically the same. Izuku impresses Luis's older sisters, Eleanor and Katlea. The two are impressed with Izuku, but Eleanor is still as rough with Izuku. The scenario of Mr. Colbert sharing his past, revealing that he actually burned down the villages to get rid of the plague, which kind of angers Agnes, since Mr. Colbert saved her in one of those burned down villages. She had a vendetta towards the man that destroyed her home, but Izuku convinces her to let it go. It wasn't worth it, and that the experience made her who she is. After hearing this, Agnes would calm down significantly and was very impressed already with Izuku. Now she developed a crush. Julio, admiring actually Izuku and having a lot of respect for him, treats him almost like a brother in a way. So we pick up with Luis and Izuku were actually dragged into we're dragged into the ward by the now Queen Henrietta, by using both Izuku and Luis's powers to have an advantage at this point. Have an advantage during the war. Tristain versus Albion, the new state of Reconquista, precisely on the day of the Silver Advent, also known as New Year's. Izuku was walking around and enjoying the Silver Advent festival by himself, since Luis had to go with Julia to check up on some stuff, like in the anime. And when evening came, they actually had a feast with the people with the people in the anime in season 2, episode 11. An argument rises up when Gish telling how he was actually saved miraculously by a fairy, and boasting saying something along the lines of just almost barely dying, but just so he can meet her again, which actually made Izuku a little bit angry with his response, as he would say, Izuku saying, "A person does not die just so they can just meet their savior. If you do so, you're nothing but a fool and a liability in the battlefield, don't you think?" A little bit of a conversation happens afterwards, but Izuku, feeling insulted, stood up and told Gish, "You may be talented with magic, but if you're truly serious about this war, you'll get your priorities in check." Then left the area, as Siesta actually followed Izuku and drags him to her hotel room and gives Izuku a sleeping potion. Confusing Izuku, Siesta would explain, as Siesta would actually say, "Julio told me to give you this. He told me that Luis is planning something very stupid. She is quite stubborn, and this is a little something, so if you need to run, it'll make it a lot easier, especially if her pride is on the line, so take it." As Izuku would say, "But why? What's going on?" Siesta would say, like I said, Julia asked me to give it to you, but if you want to know more, you might want to ask Julia himself when he's alone." As they kept on talking, sudden explosions could be heard. As they looked out the window and saw Tristain soldiers attacking the civilians, and then themselves, as Izuku rushed to knock out the soldiers and saving the civilians until dawn. Once morning arrived, they helped evacuate the town and board the civilians onto the flying ships. When Julio called Izuku over to talk to him, Julio would say, "Izuku, I have something to tell you." As Izuku would say, "Is that about the potion that Siesta gave me?" As Julie would say, "Yes. The other day I overheard one of the Queen's advisors speaking to Louise, asking her to be the rear guard." As Izuku gets a little bit surprised, "Rear guard? I can't just let her do that. Not alone at least. I'll go to talk to her." And as Julie would say, "No, you don't understand, Izuku. The advisor suggested that the both of you be the rear guards together, but she said that you have to return to your world once you got the chance to do so." She was in tears when she said that. "So if you want to prevent her from, doing anything hasty and just trying to sacrifice herself, you have the means, so be discreet. I don't want her finding out beforehand." As Izuku would be nodding to this, having a little bit of mixed feelings on what he heard by Julio. During the evacuation, Louise went to Izuku and told him that she would be the rear guard and that Izuku must be leaving this place and not get involved. As Izuku, not really surprised, he looked around for some excuse to make her take the potion, and he sees some cases containing some wine bottles. Although he's underage, he would make an exception, coming up with an excuse of having a toast before, he left, as it's customary in his world, even though it was for a movie he saw a couple of years ago, hoping that she would just take the bait. Louise, on the other hand, tells him that she actually wants him to marry her, as Izuku is left a little bit speechless, as he never expected for her to say such a thing. As Izuku would say, Are are you sure that you're okay with me?" As Louise would say, "Oh, silly Izuku, it has to be you. I wouldn't want it any other way." As Izuku's heartstrings were being tugged, as he was about to cry with the sentimental stuff. While he was being dragged to an merchant stand, they still had some items out. As the merchant was in a rush to put his merchandise safe, Luis asked for 2 bottles with the flowers inside, known as Eclair d'Amour, and the merchant saying that they're for free, they're on the house, that he needs to get rid of all of his items before he leaves. As Luis would be dragging him to a small chapel. Luis places the 2 bottles with the flowers at the altar and leaving Izuku to prepare the 2 glasses of wine. While Luis prayed at a statue, Izuku made sure that Luis's glass had the potion and everything was set. Luis joins Izuku at the altar. They exchanged their vows as they both said their vows and drank their glass of wine, and the 2 bottles with the flower actually start blooming, surprising Izuku as Izuku noticed that the potion was taking effect. Izuku told her that, that he was actually sorry and he had to do it for her own good. Before Luis could say anything, she fell asleep by the effects of the potion as Izuku caught her before she hit the ground, hugging her tight as tears actually started to fall from his cheek onto Luis's face. Once he made it outside carrying Luis in a bridal style, Julio popped out of nowhere. Julio saying, "So, you managed to pull it off, I see." As Izuku would say, Yes, I did. I feel awful by doing something like this. As Julie would say, "I know, but it was the only way. So come on, let's get out of here." As Izuku says, "No, Julio, you guys go. I'll be the rear guard." As Julie would say, "What do you mean we have to go?" As Izuku would say, "No, Julio, you and Luis just get out of here, while I'll be the rear guard." As Julie would say, I don't understand your reasoning of staying." As Izuku says, "It's simple. It's a hero's job to protect those who need protecting and also to protect the person they love the most with all they've got. So I'll be the rear guard. Now go." As Julie would say, "You realize that you'll most likely die, right?" As Izuku would say, "Julio, you're starting to sound like a certain person I knew, telling me that I will just fail no matter what. I tell you right now that I'll make sure to come back but if I don't, just give this to Lee, so just take care of her." As Izuku ran off, everyone was evacuated and they go. As Izuku was actually alone to face Albion and its troop of at least 80,000 soldiers. Izuku, after hours of fighting, he was exhausted, and he took at least what it seems to be half of the troops. So he actually charged a 60% one for all, full cowling, and did some big attacks. But it wasn't enough, so he actually tried to go plus ultra and try to deliver a final blow to the very army itself, as his body at this point exhausted, his arms broken, his legs almost bent out of shape in this case, would be laying on the very battlefield as he just is talking to Delph, almost insinuating that he's about to die. Meanwhile, Luis manages to wake up. She looks around confused. Julio tells her where she is, then wonders where Izuku is. As Julio tells her everything that happened, as she got on her feet, the bottle containing the flower rolled out of Luis's resting place. It suddenly shined very bright, that could almost blind someone, and the bottle actually shattered, leaving only the base where now the dried up flower remains, confusing and worrying about Izuku. So, back in the My Hero universe, Inko was actually sleeping. All Might was actually currently living with Inko ever since Izuku's disappearance, and was actually watching the news like a hawk to see if anything on Izuku came up, when suddenly a picture frame with a picture of Izuku smiling fell off the wall, shattering the glass and ruining the frame. At the same time, Inko yelled out Izuku's name. All Might kind of rushed in, as All Might would say, where's Izuku?" As Inko is quite sad, saying, "Toshinori, I have a bad feeling that Izuku's in trouble." As All Might, basically Small Might, would say, what makes you say that?" As Inko would say, "I actually had a nightmare, and I saw my poor Izuku die." As All Might says, "Oh, I guess you don't want to know what just happened in the living room." As Inko was kind of confused. "What do you mean?" as All Might walked Inko into the living room, and along the way, he explained, as All Might would say, so before you yelled, Izuku's name, the picture frame with Izuku smiling actually fell off the floor, on the floor and actually shattered. As Inko looked at the picture frame on the ground, as she started to think if it was just a bad omen, then Izuku could be dead somewhere, which made Inko cry as All Might tried to hug her. So, yeah, I'll leave it off at this part, guys. Basically that's what we have right now. So, yeah, that's where I'm ending it right now. Currently, it's been something. It's been something. I'm not gonna lie. Give a kudos to Ed. God damn it, I still needed to edit it. I knew I fucking needed to edit it still. I do apologize. I kind of let Ed do the majority of this stuff, but I kind of wanted to edit it, but my eyes are burning right now. They're red. I got pink eye right now. It's fucking, it's not cool, dude. It's not cool. So yeah, this is the script. Oh my god. Could basically just post it somewhere, but no, fuck that shit. It's a lot. 4,000 words. Oh my god. So yeah, so if you guys liked it, comment down below. As well, give out any suggestions. And hey, actually guys, I have a Discord server. I don't know if for you the new guys have been subscribing to me. I do have a Discord server. I just don't kind of post anything there, but I'll try to post stuff there. I'll try to be more active. I am kind of always on Discord in a way, but just that I'm not on my own server. Well, I'll try to update any news on what I have currently working in progress. So regardless, if you guys, I'll link down a description on my Discord server. Again, thanks to Erdgan Tsuchimikado for helping me out with the script. And also, oh god, man, he was fucking doing this until 6 a.m. in the morning. You see, dedication, my guys. But regardless, I hope, you liked the video. Comment down below any suggestions, if you guys want me to continue this one. And also be posting the other what ifs. Just that I've been kind of I'm not gonna lie, I've been kind of distracted doing other drawings or some other stuff. So yeah. So have a good night, guys.